Get on the train. I think we're ready to get started. Hi, I'm Jennifer Murray. I'm the town planner. I want to welcome you all tonight to our second public meeting for the passenger rail platform alternatives analysis project. Appreciate you all coming out to give your input. Tonight I just want to introduce our planning commission. They are our steering committee for this project. Planning commissioners here on the side. And also our consultants, VHB, Dave Saladino, and Eric Wallen. So we're going to let VHB lead the meeting. I guess the only things I need to tell you is that there's a sign-in sheet going around. If you could sign that, that'd be great. And when you give your input at the appropriate time in the meeting, if you could just state your name before you give your input so we can get you into the minutes. Okay, without further ado,
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, David Saladino with VHB. Just before launching, I'm curious how many of you were here back in June for the first round of this, presenting information. Okay, so maybe a little less than half, so that's good. We included some kind of background slides, assuming there'd be people who hadn't been here, so I'm glad you made that decision. So here's the agenda. Here are the things we're going to touch on. Not a whole lot of content. What we really want to do is focus on the 4 sites that we working with the Planning Commission, narrowed down for evaluation for a rail platform for Amtrak service. Display those sites, talk about some of the criteria that were considered in terms of evaluating, and then touch on, for those of you who may have seen the online survey, the results from that survey, and then really open it up. So we're here as much to present information as we are to listen. So.
I'm afraid that this was not very Gary Daker. I'm afraid this is not very well announced. I know some of my neighbors that I'm sure have not heard about this.
Well, it was advertised in several different places. At the end of the survey, on Front Porch Forum, it went out by Constant Contact today. It's on the town website. I sent an email to people in your neighborhood that I know, Gary. I did not go door to door. This is early in the process. I can knock on doors before our next presentation to the select board.
A letter, the way the old-fashioned way.
I'll do it old-fashioned style.
A lot of these people don't have email or social media or whatever. Phyllis Armstrong being one. I don't know about Solon Colbert.
Well, let's see if we have any sort of consensus that comes out of this meeting tonight, and then I'll have a better idea of what neighborhoods to target.
The problem is, a lot of this stuff will be fait accompli without their input.
Yeah. All right, thanks.
So at a high level, the items we'll be talking through, a quick overview for those who haven't been involved previously on the project itself. Talk about the four platform locations we've looked at, touch on the survey, and then the discussion. In terms of our scope of work, what we were brought in to do, we got started back in May. It's been from a planning perspective, a fairly condensed time frame. We're shooting to have some recommendations back to V-Trans, who will then carry forward, and we'll touch on that. So we had our kickoff meeting with the Planning Commission back in May. We've had 3 meetings with the Planning Commission serving as a steering committee. We were here back in June, mid-June, for the first public meeting to get input on the overall project and input on things that you'd like to see, attributes of a good location for a rail platform. We are here tonight in September, end of September, for the second public meeting. From here, the idea is to then present the what will hopefully come away with a consensus recommendation to the select board. If not, maybe it's the top 2 sites for discussion by the select board in October, and then wrapping that up in a final report. So just to kind of step back a little bit, for those who aren't aware, the Ethan Allen Express, the Amtrak service, will be extended, assuming all of the funding snafus in Washington, D.C. get worked through, which always seem to happen. The schedule is 2021, 2022 will extend from currently terminating in Rutland, extending all the way up to Burlington, with a stop in Middlebury for gents in Burlington. There would be 2 stops under that service, 2 stops per day in Middlebury, 1 in the morning as it heads south to New York, and then 1 return in the evening on its way back to Burlington. So we're talking about a platform. That's really the focus of what we're looking at. What does that mean? It's roughly a 12-foot wide by 300-foot slab of concrete. I'll show some pictures that it'll resonate with you. You've seen these before. ADA accommodations and a closed shelter for wheelchair lift. We looked at parking demand, and so based on some ridership estimation for this service, once it's in place 20 years out, so looking at future ridership projections, we estimate approximately 13 spaces demand for that at the station. Much of that will be short-term, will be people arriving just before the train comes, letting a passenger off, and then or waiting to pick someone up and then departing. And then the question is where. So that's really the challenge that we've been presented with, and that we're presenting tonight is where does that platform go? Here's just some examples from some nearby locations. The upper left is a new one that Amtrak put in up in Ticonderoga, Rutland, Waterbury, and St. Albans are all examples. This case would be very similar to what you see on the upper left, Ticonderoga, where the platform is, it would be more similar to what's down below. So up above where you've got Ticonderoga, that the platform is raised above the rail elevation. In that case, they don't have freight rail service that's coming through, and so you can have the platform sit higher. In this case, as in Rutland, freight rail also uses this same line, so you've got to keep the platform low. When the train comes, it'll flip out stairs for somebody to climb to get up onto the trains. So some of the work that we've done so far is to kind of narrow in the window of the locations. Our charge is where in Middlebury should the platform be. It's not, the universe is not all possible places on the rail line in Middlebury. So we then began to kind of filter out or screen out some of the areas that were not appropriate or possible for a rail platform. So just to kind of set some of the context, this is generally the town of Middlebury, Porter Medical Center at the south end, the rail yard, Seymour Street underpass kind of up at the north end. We're here, the town offices, you can see the Cross Street Bridge here. And so the red areas are essentially areas that through discussions with either Vermont Rail or some of the property owners or V-Trans or consultation with environmental resource mapping, we basically X'd out or are showing as red. So anything kind of north of the underpass, Middlebury Railroad and then rail yard and the underpass is off limits, which keeps an area open from the underpass kind of through the Marble Works. There's a tunnel that's going in that everyone is aware of, so not able to stop within the tunnel, so that's off limits. Crossing Cross Street, as we get south of the bridge 286 here, this is environmentally sensitive. There's wetlands, you're in the river corridor, so this is off limits. And then generally from proximity to the downtown, we drew a line kind of at Porter Medical Center. So you can see the areas that are not marked as red were kind of open territory for consideration for platforms. We iterated a little bit. We had some discussions at the first session and a number of discussions with the Planning Commission on within those open areas what physical locations made the most sense. And we narrowed down to these 4 locations. We'll touch on each, moving from north to south. The first location, this is up. So this is just a perspective. This is the former train station to the right, Middle Seymour Street here, heading towards us into the foreground, heading towards Marble Works. Off in the distance is Seymour Street. And so generally this area here is location for site number 1. Just to orient everyone, here is the underpass here on Seymour Street. This is the former train station here. We were just looking we were standing here and looking in this direction.
We don't see what you're doing.
The pointers.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
There we go.
That's not good at all.
There we go.
I don't think this pointer works on here.
We were just able to see.
There
There it is.
Yeah, it doesn't show up very well.
Doesn't. Maybe I'll use an old-fashioned pointer here. So the former railroad station is here. Middle Seymour, this heads off to the Marble Works. So what's new, what's shown as new here, this is the platform, so a 300-foot-long platform with some plantings behind it, and in this case here, 17 parking spaces, so slightly more than the 13 provided off of Middle Seymour Street. There's some facts along the left. This is fairly close to downtown. It's walkable. The 17 sites, the 17 parking spaces here, and the platform are all located outside of public property. So this line right here shows everything on this side is state right of way. It's part of The railroad operates it, but the state of Vermont owns this property. And then between these two lines here, this is the town's right-of-way along Middle Seymour. So this site is, I think, unique among all of them in that there's no private property impacts at this site. No natural resource impacts that we were aware of. It's a fairly built-up area already. You've got the roadway, you've got the rail yard. It's been fairly disturbed over time. And then in terms of costs, we estimated about $500,000, $550,000 total for construction costs. In terms of the town share, what the best guidance that we've been given from V-Trans is that V-Trans will pay for basically the slab of concrete, and the rest is up for negotiation. So it's not definitive guidance. So we kind of took a conservative approach and took the cost, roughly $250,000 for the platform, off the bottom line or off the top line. So total capital cost $550, take off the $250 for the platform. That leaves, I think, at most $300,000 for the town share to build the sidewalk, any landscaping, walkways, and so forth.
Why do you need,
State your name.
Hudson Tilford, why do you need a slab of concrete the size of a football field for a train platform?
So V-Trans or Amtrak's guidance actually has 500 feet is their requirement for a platform. And the idea is that their trains, they've got five passenger cars, and the idea is that they don't want to direct people into any one particular car, to announce everyone who's getting off Middlebury get on the first two cars. So, through discussions with Amtrak and V-Trans, it was okay to go down to 300 feet, which allows, I think, 4 of the cars to be serviced. So even one of the 5 cars, the people won't be able to get off at the stop. So that's what's really driving the line.
Okay, you had a good answer.
Good. Yeah.
I think the truth is, the Amtrak does direct you to one, exit way from different cars, so. But, yeah, 500 is what they usually have this for.
Gary Baker again. Looks like you're gonna have a diagonal or straight-in parking there.
It could go either way. I mean, we showed it works with head-in. Diagonal would be kind of tough. You'd have to, depending which way you orient it, you'd have to turn around at some place to get pointed in the right direction.
Right, well, how are they gonna get into traffic from the parking area? That's a two-way street,
Right. Yeah, I mean, you would just have to back out onto, I mean, it's,
heavy traffic.
yeah, I mean, it's traffic calming in some ways. It's I think it benefits by having the S-curve that you don't have you've got somewhat high speeds, but not super high speeds here.
Fred Huntington almost said that when he was planning director. And then what happens in the wintertime when someone's coming into the Marble Works, going through the underpass on an icy day, and they've got to stop to let somebody out?
As they come up the hill here, I mean, I can imagine a bad scenario, right? If it's icy and somebody's slipping back down the hill, hopefully the roadway is maintained.
It's always icy.
Yeah. I mean, we're showing 17 spaces here. There's an opportunity to tighten that up so that you've got further run going up the hill.
And coming the other way?
Yeah, I mean, again, you're going downhill and hopefully you're proceeding with caution. You've got the cars that are parked there.
I mean, you could always let the person off at the bottom of the hill or at the top of the hill, instead of in the middle of the hill. That could work too.
Okay, another question is, how are people gonna get across the tracks?
So the platform is on the same side as the parking.
Yeah, but what if someone wants to get onto the platform because of it's icy and they let them out on Seymour Street, they're gonna come across the tracks? There's gonna be a way for that to happen.
Not officially.
How are you gonna prevent it?
I guess just to step back, this, and Jen reminded me of this, although this is colored and arguably looks nice, it's a very early stage design, a very concept plan, so
Well, I'm trying to get,
there's lots of details that do need to be worked out, and so we haven't gotten to that level of detail.
and then the walkway for people coming down to get on the platform from the town. Where's that?
The walkway from town.
Like a sidewalk?
Yeah, like a sidewalk.
Yeah, that's a good, we actually at one point did have a sidewalk here
Well,
extending
there is a
along.
crossing, there's a sidewalk that ends in.
There is.
Front of Phyllis's house.
No, it's so there was an earlier iteration of this that did have that walkway through, but you point out, good point, you basically are assuming someone's coming up Seymour Street underneath the underpass and then coming up this way.
Or just getting out of their car and wanting to go into town,
Mm-hmm.
or get off the train and go to town, walking to town.
The most direct route, and they could go this way.
Up through the Marlboro.
Yeah, that is a good comment. That is
There's
not
no
shown.
public way to do that.
Right, as this is shown now, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's a good point.
And there's an old path there that goes across two people's private property. But I'm sure they're not gonna want to train people coming up through there, no fun intended.
Yeah.
Sort of a procedural question. Do you want us to ask questions as you go through each site, or do you want to go through them and then circle back?
I prefer the latter, yeah, if we can
Okay.
get through the four, just so you can see the context of all four.
Yeah, I have one question, but I'm fine with holding it.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Yep. So that was site one. Site two is at the National Bank. This is the National Bank of Middlebury site. So here we're looking from Marble Works across the tracks. This is the retaining wall. This is the parking for the bank. The bank is just off to the right hand side. In this case, the platform would be set slightly, below the retaining wall. The retaining wall would actually need to move back a bit, but the parking would be untouched. There'd be stairs on either side, you can't see the other side of the retaining wall, and then there'd be a handicap accessible ramp off to the left here. It's all shown here. So we were just looking from this vantage point, Marble Works looking this direction. You can see the platform and kind of the yellow, the gray here, the ramp steps down. So this would utilize the 13 spaces that are there now for the bank, plus some additional on-street spaces here on Methodist Lane, for overflow parking. As I mentioned before, the trains would be coming generally off bank hours, so they'd be coming in 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning and 7:30, 8 o'clock in the evening. So in theory, there's some synergies between the need for that parking. At the same time, it is a private business that owns and controls that parking, so there's certainly need to be additional conversations with the owners there.
Will you reiterate the costs for that, like you did for the?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. So this, just noting some things here, I'm sure everyone can read all of the details. This is obviously closer than the first site to downtown, so that's an attribute of this site. We'll get into that was ranked as one of the highest attributes of a good site is proximity to downtown. So this is fairly close to downtown, depending on where you put the pin and call downtown. This is fairly close to most destinations. The 13 spaces here and 6, you could arguably say 19 spaces. The ownership we talked about, privately owned ownership here. And then the cost here, this is cut off for some reason, but the overall cost, 1.75 million. This is by far the most expensive because of the need, as part of the tunnel project, putting in kind of U-shaped walls through here. The U's are not wide enough to accommodate, if you can envision a U with the the tracks in them. The wall is not far enough back to accommodate this 12-foot wide platform, so that U would either need to be expanded or retrofitted to accommodate the platform.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, so if you envision the U that's going in here, these concrete, precast concrete U-shaped structures that are going in with the tracks, in cross section.
The tunnel?
Well, the top of the tunnel comes off over here, so it's just the bottom half of the tunnel.
Because the track's being lowered.
Yes, yeah,
So they're lowering the track.
yeah. And so the tunnel part is the two U's coming together. You've got the tunnel. Here we just have the bottom, and so then the tracks are kind of set in that U. There's not enough room on either side of the U to fit the platform in. And so, I mean, it's fairly detailed. What we have assumed, though, in terms of the town cost, is that V-Trans would bear the cost of that, any retrofit or redesign or reconstruction of the U-wall there. So I'm happy to go into detail, but it's kind of off the books in terms of cost to the town.
And just to clarify on the cost, this is not actually acquiring the property from the bank, it's just getting usage for it?
Correct,
Okay.
yep. And, this is, you probably can't see, but this line here, this black line is the edge of the state right of way. And so any, the platform in this case is all within the public right of way.
Hudson Telford again. You may not be able to answer this, but somebody in this room can. Directly in front of Coldwell Banker Real Estate, there are 6 parking spaces straight in. Do those belong to the town, or do they belong to the building?
To my knowledge, they belong to the building.
I drove by earlier this afternoon just to scope it out, if you will. And at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, there's 6 unused parking spaces directly in front of Coldwell Banker Bill Beck. It might get filled up through the train station. Just a
You're
thought.
talking about spaces in front of the building or behind the building?
No, directly in front of it.
Oh, I thought you were talking about
On the
behind.
on the Seymour Street side,
So that I don't know.
directly across from the bank's parking lot.
Yeah, that I don't know.
Gary Baker again, who owns those 6 spots on Methodist Lane? That's a one-way street now.
Yeah, so they would need to be constructed.
I know, but who owns the land?
I believe this is still within the town's right of way. I don't recall if we look at the property lines here.
I think it might encourage a little bit. I think you'd have to acquire
Some
something there.
acquisition.
Yeah.
I would think. It would be one of the one-way street.
If you could fit two ways, yeah. Yeah.
Approximate distance from site 1 to site 2.
I'd say 400 feet.
Yeah.
Not the crow flies.
I mean, if this is 300 feet here, I would say if you were to,
That crow had to go around and go through the underpass.
Yeah, well, yeah, if the crow is constrained to do that, then yes, but they're almost across the river attacking one another.
they're close, yeah.
How deep is the U?
I don't know that. I'm gonna look at Jim. Jim may know the answer to
Yeah,
this.
it feathers out, it's, what's happening is as we lower the rail line in the middle of the tunnel, right, it feathers out on each side. So here you're getting pretty shallow. We've talked about how the U's would work with the retaining wall of the bank there. So they're kind of at approximately the level of the retaining wall at that point before they level out at the Elm Street Bridge.
It's about 5 or 6 feet tall here.
The wall above the parking, right, or above, that's about 5 feet above.
It would go about 5 feet above the, where the platform would be, so 5 to 6 feet above the rail.
Yeah, so probably not that different than the current retaining wall. Yeah. And I think the track itself is maybe less than a foot lower in this location. So we're almost to the top, to the north.
So just to clarify, in this location, the platform is lower than the parking lot. So if you're in the parking lot or on Seymour Street looking, you don't see the platform, it's below the parking lot.
Right. It's really just see it. Yeah.
Which I was also confused about, so I figured.
Yeah. You really just see it from this vantage point here.
Yeah.
All right, the third location is, let's see here. Mislabeled here, but so this is the third location. This is the Cross Street Bridge. This is looking to the south along the tracks. This was back when all of the foliage was in full display. So the location we're looking at here is on the left-hand side, on the Water Street side.
That's mislabeled, by the way.
It is, I know.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry, you listen carefully.
you're absolutely right.
Sorry, guys.
This is correctly labeled. So this is the third site here. So to orient you, we were up, the screen is cropping, but the Cross Street Bridge is right here. The river is just off to the bottom of the screen. You can see Water Street here. And so this is all a private property. You can see the outline of the property line here. The platform, the rail line is just at the bottom edge of the slide platform. 14 parking spaces shown here, and then access in and out with roadway and sidewalk on either side. Technically, this is the closest. If we basically use this building as kind of the center of downtown. This is the closest, as the crow, or I guess as the person walks, closest to this location downtown. But in some ways, I feel at least that it feels a little bit farther, just because it's kind of out of sight. It's kind of over the edge. in terms of kind of safety perception. It's always good to have eyes on where, people where they are. This is not necessarily the most visible location, and so there may be some concerns over safety location. That said, it's also kind of underutilized space right now. It's not a very high value parcel as maybe some of the other locations may be. So overall, the cost, $750,000 total, that's to construct the roadway, platform, and so forth. Taking off the cost for the platform again, so total town share is about $500,000. And I guess I would note here, we're also estimating annual operations and maintenance costs. They're fairly small. They range for each site from between $3,000 to $6,000, really depending on how much road to plow and lawn to mow and so forth.
And to be clear, do those costs include any property acquisition?
No, so those aren't included in any of these costs.
But in this, just to clarify, in this option, there would need to be some property acquisition as far as I understand.
Very much so, yes.
Right. So there would be an additional cost there in property acquisition that's not local.
That's right, yes.
Excuse me, Bruce Burgess, did you just say this is closest to downtown?
Yeah, I mean, closest to this building, if you call this downtown.
How many feet from that platform walking along the sidewalk to this building?
It's probably 4.
Yeah, I mean, I guess as the crow flies, this is the closest. It's probably about the same distance as a crow walks.
We're not talking about birds, I think. I think that you're mistaken about how close this platform is to downtown. I suggest that Seymour Street, both of those are close.
Yeah, I guess I was only characterizing it. It feels like it's close, but it's not. And I agree with you. It is. I mean, it's right there.
Is that
I see
important how it feels?
I'll leave that to you. That was just my sense. Is that it feels close.
That was my question to you.
What was the question?
I suggest that it's not the closest to downtown.
Hi, Gary Winslet. I just wanted to ask a quick question of clarification. So you said that there's going to need to be some property acquisition here. Do we have any sort of estimate as to how much it would cost to acquire that property? Because I mean, if it's really cheap, that's really different than if it's, several $100,000. Do we have any sort of estimate on what that would cost to acquire it?
We have not estimated that. I mean, it partially depends on whether this becomes the site and then the property value. Again, it's somewhat of an open market discussion. There have been conversations with the property owners. I believe this one, Jen, had conversations with all of the property owners or any affected property owners.
Yeah, he's interested in hosting, but we didn't talk money.
Thanks.
Am I right that, Dr. Saunders, that every one of these requires property acquisition except for the first?
That's correct, yes. Yep.
Is there any acquisition on the first one? I had that question earlier tonight.
No.
Okay.
It's all stayed in town. Right away.
Can you go back to the former slide, please? Sorry, my name is Nancy. Yeah, do you have a date for that photo? Because that's no longer
Yeah, this is.
accurate. It doesn't look like
We
that.
do have much better
Much
photos. This was
better than forested.
as I was going through right before coming here, I realized it would be good to have a photo. And so this is on Google. This is 2012. We have much more recent photos, but this was kind of the last.
There are the significant changes to.
Yes. Yeah. But it's just to point out the location. I figured that would be work.
And I would argue that perhaps this actually might be the most visible in terms of eyes on because of the overhead perspective from the bridge. My house is right behind where those trees used to be.
Yeah.
And now there's a bigger shot from the bridge and also from like Steve's. It's highly visible.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. That's you obviously you experience this every day, so that's helpful.
Greenborn, that is the site of the first train station.
So I've heard.
Historical.
Yeah. And ice storage or ice loading facility. Yeah. All right. Moving on, the last site here, this is what we call the dog park site. This is the Porter Medical Center, the ball fields, the college's ball fields, and so it's essentially the field. The dog park sits about here, so it's just off along the tracks adjacent to the dog park. So here we are, the medical center is off the screen here, the dog park is shown here. Fairly long drive to get down to the parking lot. We're showing 15 parking spaces here with the platform turn around for drop-offs, bus drop-offs or vehicular drop-offs. And then rather than a full concrete sidewalk all the way down, we're showing here pedestrian path, stone, dust, pedestrian path to get up to the parking lot for the medical center. I think this one is definitely the farthest from downtown. This property is all owned by the college. There have been some discussions with the college about potential cost sharing.
I have talked to the college since the survey was prepared, and they're interested in hosting. They are possibly interested in creating some parking for their own needs. There may be an opportunity to cost share here. And they would also be willing to provide a security sweep and a blue phone to improve security concerns at this location. So those are newest news.
This one has, of the 4 sites, the least constraints in terms of space. So we actually had an earlier version that had a few more parking spaces, so that's an option. As shown here with the 15 spaces, it's still fairly expensive because of all the infrastructure, the roadway itself, climbing down the grade. So we're showing a 1.5 million total cost, about $1.25 million for town costs. So most of that is the infrastructure, the roadway, the turnaround, and all the asphalt that's going in. This one also has the highest operating cost, we estimated about $6,000 a year. So just to kind of wrap up or kind of bring my views to the end and open up to you. We did, I imagine many of you had a chance to go online and take the survey. As of a couple hours ago, we had over 500 survey results, which I was joking with Jen before. We have, our company has a SurveyMonkey page where we're tracking lots and lots of surveys in big cities, and this by far is the largest response we've seen in any of them. I mean, that's a real credit. This is a community that wants to be heard, which is really great. And we kept trying to get the latest, and every time we refreshed, it'd be 5 more surveys. And we're this is 2 weeks out, or at least a week out since the votes came out. So great response, but obviously just a sample, not 100% sample. So based on what we heard, 523 votes. The highest vote getter was the northerly site, the Middle Seymour Street, at about 58% of the total votes. And it almost goes in order. So the Bank of Middlebury site was second highest with about a third of the votes. And then the Water Street and the Dog Park were both about 4 to 5% of the total votes.
That's the number 1 choice?
Number 1 also happens to be the number 1, the highest.
Yeah,
highest
but
ranked.
we were asked to vote for 2, as I recall.
You picked 2, and then of the next question is, of those 2, which one do you like the best?
Okay.
And so this is the result of that second question. You may recall, so there was a question about indicating which of these criteria felt very important, or not so important, or I guess neutral or not important. Lots of data here, but just the one piece that we flagged here in terms of, so the teal color is very important. So safety, the multimodal accessibility, ability to walk, ability for transit service, and then accessibility to downtown were the 3 where the very important was the highest ranking. And so, that's telling in some ways. And as we think about the different sites, there's kind of different flavors across the different sites. Some may be a little bit better based on your own kind of personal ranking, may have higher values of safety. We're talking about whether the site over on Water Street, whether that is a safe site, accessibility to downtown and so forth. But that was kind of the public's sense of what was important for the platform. And lastly, this is just a kind of word cloud. These show kind of the more commonly used words in the open-ended. There's opportunity to comment open-ended. And without going obviously into all of those comments, these are some of the things that resonated: downtown, cost, town, parking, location, and so forth. So I think with that, that's where we are. So I guess the sentiment of the public of 563 of your neighbors have said that site 1 is the top choice fairly clearly. I mean, it seems between 1 and 2, those got 80%, 90% of the vote. But we're here to listen, you know, the information about the college cost sharing that's fairly new, that wasn't presented in the survey, that may not matter, but, you know, it's worth bringing up today to see if that changes folks' minds.
I think other new information is that on site 2, the bank has expressed they're not very interested in that option at all, if there's any way around it, so I wanted to be clear about that. We may not have a willing owner there.
So is site 1 the best choice? Does anyone not think site 1 is the best choice?
Yes. I don't think.
Adam Franco. Not that site 1 is a bad choice. I think it's a reasonable choice given some of the other constraints. However, site 2, the National Bank Middlebury space, has some significant advantages in terms of access to downtown. It's a 5-minute walk from all 3 of the historic inns downtown versus it is a 10-minute walk to the Maple Street location from the inn on the green. So the furthest one does extend it to almost double the Rebecca walk under the underpass. So in terms of getting tourists into town without cars, certainly the Seymour Street is more advantageous. The second point about the Seymour Street location is that it's the only one of these that is on several different public transportation routes. So the buses from Burlington and the Tri-Town Loop through Virgins and Bristol all come down Seymour Street or Main Street and detour and come through there. And so it doesn't require a bus connection. People can be dropped off right at the train station from existing public transit routes. Similarly, the other actor routes around town stop it on Main Street only half a block away from there, so it's very easy. And then lastly, the Maple Street is somewhat constrained in terms of turning around and access. As Gary mentioned, for a bus to come to that stop and drop people off, it then has to loop through the Marble Works to turn around and then come back out past the station, versus Seymour Street, just because it's part of the gridded road network, that doesn't require those kind of detour loops in order to get people to that station. Last point, there was a mention that the Maple Street location was connectable to downtown via the Marble Works. However, as Gary mentioned, there is no sidewalk on Maple Street through the Marble Works. And as well for a bicycle connection through Marble Works, the current design for the Printer's Alley does not allow you to connect up to Main Street. So Maple Street is somewhat constrained in terms of access there now.
Unless you go the long way around.
Unless you go the long way around, which has some steep hills and traffic and whatnot.
Yeah, great points, thank you. Sir?
One question, oh, sorry, Rob Carter. When we, at the past meeting, you identified the locations, but there was no discussion of one side or the other side. So I'm wondering why you decided at the bank site, on the bank side as opposed to the Marble Works side of the tracks, since that also has a lot of potential and doesn't have the bank issue and moving of the wall and all of that.
So at one point we did have a 2A and B. We did look at. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So here we are on this side here. We did look at both sides at earlier stage in the planning commission. Will remember that. Some early discussions with the property owner on the Marble Works side seemed to indicate it was not really worth continuing with that site as a feasible alternative. Largely due to the parking implications, as can't really see, but obviously there's no parking, there's no opportunity to provide additional parking within Marble Works. It's all what can be parked is parked now, and so those impacts on day-to-day business didn't seem like a feasible option.
So it's the property owners
Yes.
is the issue? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Similarly, at this location, we also had 1A and B, so we did look at a platform adjacent to the former train station, and for similar reasons that jumped on.
Frank McCarty. I'm wondering about the parking for this, just in general. the parking, the number of spaces and so forth. I know that we have gone down, parked overnight, or, parked for a few days at Castleton, while we take the train down to New York and pick up the car when we come back. Would that be allowed here? And if so, I wonder that the number of spaces is going to be enough.
So to the first question, I guess I'll skip that. I would defer to the town on that, particularly in the locations where, this would be town parking, and so it would depend on how it was signed, whether long-term parking was allowable. The parking estimate, the calculations that we went through are kind of Amtrak's best estimated guidance for parking, which includes long-term and short-term parking. So based on what V-Trans has estimated for daily ridership here, 13 felt a reasonable number.
Pretty pessimistic on Amtrak's part.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know that you can answer the question. Is long term? I imagine there will be some long term parking allowable. I think we're just talking out loud. I think ideally there's some satellite parking where people can park, and then they can take after to get to the station.
There is a park and ride on Exchange, off of Exchange Street, is that correct?
Yeah.
About 2 blocks from both of these sites?
Yep. I mean, there's also the Mill Street parking lot. I mean, it's not impossible to walk from Mill Street over the pedestrian bridge to Site 1. There's redevelopment happening at the Greg's Market site. I have suspicion to believe there's going to be access parking at that location. Danforth Pewter has been very willing to talk to us about parking and rail platform stuff. So there's a lot of very walkable satellite locations for additional overflow parking if Site 1 is inadequate.
As an aside, I looked on Amtrak's website at the train station in Port Henry. They have 10 short-term and 10 long-term parking sites. And having taken a friend to the train the other day, there's no parking issue whatsoever. On this site, if the 6 diagonal parking spaces were long-term parking because they're away from things, and the 6 parking spaces in front of Coldwell Banker, which are located, I think, right under that block of words that says proposed 6 on-street parking.
Right.
There's 6 spaces, unused. I drove by today, not a car on it. There's the 13 parking spaces that seem to be what you need. And there you go, it's closer to downtown. You don't have to walk through the Marble Works. You don't have to go through the underpass. What's not to love?
Just a question about, excuse me, my name is Christy Lynn. The accessibility of each of the platforms at the different sites, is there a difference in terms of the grade that each of them is on, and whether or not you would need to like step up or step down, and have lifts for wheelchairs and all that stuff, or are they the same across each of the platforms?
They would all be at the same grade relative to the train itself, and they would all have stairs that would drop out and then wheelchair lifts. The site 2 is, if you recall from the photo, there would be a ramp that would come down to make that 5 or 6 foot climb at a reasonable grade for wheelchairs. So accessing site 2 would be a little bit more involved, but certainly doable and graded appropriately.
And the cost for doing those different levels of building intervention or whatever would be V-Trans, or would be the town based on the site that was chosen?
The cost for the lift on the site, one of the slides, so there would be a small building that would have kind of cover from the weather for the wheelchair lift. That is all V-Trans covered. And then the Amtrak provides, the access onto the train.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about getting to the platform.
Yeah, so we had assumed that would be on the town.
Yeah.
And again, that's kind of up for discussion with V-Trans at some point. So this site here does have those additional costs of that ramp coming down and the stairs on both sides.
Bruce Burgess, does Ethan Allen permit bicycles on the train?
Yeah.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
But it's only so, there's only so many, and if there's ones that are put on the train earlier or before they get here, then we may not have access. The bike cars will have bike access.
For what cars?
But RDCs, the rail diesel cars that are in Vermont that are privately held right now for community rail service.
So I guess my question might be for maybe other town officials, but could we get like a quick overview of sort of like what the town finances kind of look like? Because there obviously are some real cost differences. So is the greater cost of Site 2 really going to be a major hit to the town budget? Or is it something that can more easily be afforded? Because like that is quite a bit of money difference.
Well, thank you for that softball question. We're always struggling just to pay for the infrastructure improvements we have today and maintain what we have today. So we would be scrambling to find the money in any of these scenarios.
Okay, so the cost savings of number one is a really big advantage then, probably.
She's polite enough not to ask her opinion on
Yeah.
it. That's for you to decide, Fran.
I mean, in some ways, it's your tax dollars, right?
Yes. Yeah. One is cheapest. That's nice.
I noticed in some of the survey comments, people suggested moving the platform between those two sites, 1 and 2, where it's right next to Seymour Street, instead of behind the bank. And then the parking would be using any, it wouldn't be interfering with the bank parking.
Yeah. I mean, that is an option, I guess, and then what the other gentleman said, using, these 6 spaces and then this head-in spaces here as your parking. It would be right next to that platform, but that, I guess that could be an option.
So is there any possibility to add that, or are we done with the alternative analysis?
Does anyone else think that that's a feasible, something that's?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm not sure what area you're talking about.
Yeah, unfortunately, we had connectivity, basically between, so like right, if we're looking at this site, here's the old train station,
Yeah.
Fire and Ice here. So basically right here.
In between 1 and 2.
Between the
Yes,
bank and the.
yeah, where you can walk across the tracks now, where Seymour Street goes right up next to
So the
that.
proposal would be that there's no parking spots right with the track, or with the platform. It's just the platform on the railroad, and then parking would be scattered.
Well, I get, yeah, or it could be accommodated through these spaces here and then utilization of some of those head-in spaces right on Seymour Street.
I think there's on-street parking next to it too.
Along Seymour, I think that goes away, if I recall. I should know the answer to this. I don't know if you remember offhand. I think Seymour Street gets realigned with the tunnel project, so I don't think that those parking spaces
No,
stay.
I don't think so, David. I think the parking along Seymour Street would remain as
It
is.
does remain, okay.
This spot's all.
Yes,
Hi,
ma'am.
I'm Brenda Ellison. I'm not sure I'm here on Site 2 with those new spaces you'd be adding to, what is that, Methodist Lane? I'm not sure I understand like how much is being considered short-term versus long-term, because clearly the bank is more for pull and drop off. And the ones, even though you said you didn't see any people parked there in front of Caldwell Banker, if you go to pick up Chinese food, there will be people there. So those spots are used. So I'm thinking about people who, if you don't live in Middlebury, as Frank was saying, you drive in from Bristol or New Haven, whatever, and you need to park your car. I'm not sure that's enough, so I'm just trying to, in my mind, figure out how many long-term spots of people who are going to park and keep their car there until they return. How many we think we need versus what we see. Because I think we need more than what I just see in that little bit of addition there. And so where would that overflow be for people who want to park their car for the duration when they're on the train?
You've got the on-street spaces on Seymour Street, and you've got some of these more remote lots as options, but there's no obvious parking lot right there that would be available.
On the street's not available during the winter.
Yeah.
It's fairly long.
Heather Sealy, Middlebury. So if you were to consider an option that was between sites 1 and 2, I'm assuming you could, given not considering the money issue, still add some additional parking in the town's right of way along Middle Seymour, right? Along the.
Right here?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And if the rail platform is not there, you could even push it further towards the curb, towards where you would suggest moving the platform. So you do have the potential to create, I think, some parking there.
It does seem like you would encourage the cross-track
Right.
traffic that's
problem.
not.
Depending on which side you're proposing the.
Oh, I guess I was envisioning the platform being on the other side.
Okay.
And so, I mean, you could have the unwritten rule, that don't cross here, but, we couldn't design the parking here with the intention that people are gonna cross illegally across the tracks. And Ron Rail's been pretty clear that they would not allow a crossing for whatever reason.
If that were long-term parking though, if you park at an airport, you're usually parking 10 times that distance from where you're going.
Yeah.
So, if it's long-term parking, that's not so bad. It's an interesting option.
And so other thoughts on this hybrid option, the between 1 and 2? Yeah.
Well, I guess just an observation that, I don't know, we've spent all our time so far discussing options 1 and 2, so that seems to be, and that was the sense from the survey as well, there seems to be a clear interest in locating the station somewhere around that area. And that's my first observation. I guess my other thought was that with this kind of hybrid option, if you I don't know, it's hard to see in terms of land ownership there, but it seems that if the town doesn't have to purchase any of the land to do this hybrid option, that you could put some parking on Middle Seymour, and then that you use some money to make a bridge over the pedestrian bridge over the rail, so that you don't have people constantly crossing.
I think those are all good ideas, except for the last one, the bridge. In my experience, people don't want to take the stairs and take the time to get up and over, and so it ends up being a really expensive thing that one person will use, and never use again. But I think everything else you said is reasonable.
Fence could prevent that.
Could prevent what?
People walking across the track.
Yeah, certainly you could put up fence, but I think people would still probably choose to take the long way, or maybe not. Maybe, you would also need some additional. I guess you could. You also have to have lifts in them, to have accessibility. So that gets expensive pretty quickly. Or some real spiral ramp or something to get, to have the grade get up and over.
I mean, you're an adult. If you're gonna walk across the train tracks with the train coming, it's kind of your fault. Sorry, but show some good judgment. I don't think it's unreasonable to expect people to do that.
Yeah. It doesn't go all the way there. I mean, you can still go across.
Their plan is targeted for a tunnel project.
Well,
They'll pretty much the entire extent.
When I was a kid, somebody did a crowbar really upright. Made a big house.
Still there. Yeah.
Christy Lynn, is there any consideration at this juncture of, future development of an actual train station? And if so, do any of these sites present a more valid option? I mean, the hybrid option, I think that's sort of a limitation because, are we kind of limiting our ability to build a future station if we're splitting those two functions across the track? I don't know the answer.
It's a very good question, and I guess just one thought. An earlier iteration of this plan here had, straightening out of this S curve, which obviously, or not obviously, but there's private properties right here and here, so this avoids, doesn't change the roadway, so we don't impact those. But in some future scenario, if you were able to straighten that out, that opens up this space here, and then we had an earlier version that showed a building that could be a train station with a bus turnaround. So not today, but that site, from what we looked at, and I guess the dog park site just has space out there if you wanted to build a more, something like what's across the tracks here, that looks more like a train
I'm the owner of that site.
Of which site? This year?
The one in
The one that you're gonna take over.
Oh, this. All right. Well, I'm glad we didn't show that.
Gary?
9 acres. Buy the whole thing.
So I guess, the other two sites, I mean, I guess even the Water Street site has room. The bank site is the most constrained just because of the topography there.
My name is Megan Friedling, and I apologize if this is a long comment, but I have several comments. I hope that, as Eric pointed out, the public input is pointing strongly toward options 1 and 2. So I hope that some of these conversation points are moved about the insuitability of the South Street and Water Street locations, but I want to just voice them. So I think that principally for me, one of the most important factors here is accessibility for those who don't already have access to their own personal transportation, or for those who want to travel on foot. I wonder about, I work for Middlebury College, and I wonder, has the survey been distributed to the student body? Because I feel like there are, I work through a couple different roles with a lot of students who are coming from diverse backgrounds and who do not either drive or have access to transportation. And I think that this rail platform provides a major opportunity for us to think about greater accessibility for who the college is reaching, as well as our community.
Can I just pause you? So you're all in that same comment, you're saying 3 and 4 are not good from an accessibility standpoint, just so I'm clear.
I think that South Street is really inappropriate, especially if we're thinking about travel during closed periods of the college session. I'm imagining a student walking down South Street with a wheelie suitcase or a backpack or both, starting their long journey home.
Okay.
And I think that another factor is just how we are being really thoughtful about our changing climate scenario and integrating climate change resiliency into these types of plans. I think that in that regard, the Water Street location is challenging in the sense that it's already within the floodplain, it's in the fluvial river hazard zone. It was a designated wetland for the railroad started doing work and really destroyed the native vegetation there. And
It's also the floodway.
it's the
percent of
floodway.
blockage.
Exactly. And rivers are alive and geomorphologically active. We have to respect that. The current railroad plan really challenges that in channelizing the river. That's an aside, but I'd love to see a plan that's integrated. I think we're having these conversations about Creek Road, 2 miles of the road. I'm thinking about the minimum mandate of a 25-foot vegetated area buffer between the rail line and the road, road. So just weaving these conversations together. And I think along those lines, thinking about bike parking and a permanent shelter with permanent safe bike parking, maybe even walkers, something to encourage folks really being able to use the site. And it's a much smaller size of surface there, and something with cover because we have so much inclement weather. I think that really, if we're going to put in a bike access station, I think we should do it well so that it actually gets used. The Water Street location, Amy, 66 Water Street.
Yeah.
This is near and dear to your heart. This was near and dear to our heart when when EIC did work in 2015 on the railroad trestle, which is right in our backyard. And this is not a NIMBY, not in my backyard concern. This is my backyard is the Otter Creek, which is our house is right in the line of fire too. But that access road there, if you go back to the drawings of the access on Water Street, the highlighted area is over a house. The road, I just don't think that would physically, I hope that folks have taken a tape out and actually measured the pathway there.
Yeah, my house is actually right at the top to the right.
Right.
That's my house.
The addition of the
Yeah.
sidewalk
Yeah.
too. They're right there, just east. Yep, that house. No, just east of Phoenix. That's an apartment building, and as I walked past tonight to come here, I noticed, and happened to just take a quick photo, but they're right on that west-facing wall. Or really, actually, that's south.
Yeah.
North. That's
Yeah,
south.
the right side, right?
The right
Yeah.
side. There are 4 Vermont gas hookups that are, you could actually have a bus try to turn in there and hit the apartment, and the gas hookups are right there. And it's already been identified as a challenge. There are 2 big red posts, about 4 feet. Yeah. It's a tricky spot. I don't think that, I just think that it's a nice drawing, but how it actually fit is there needs to be a lot more investigation.
Concerned too, because isn't the pickup or the drop off 7:30 in the morning, and during the school year, it's already hard to get out of Water Street and take a left. So just a consideration of the traffic for the students going in and out, getting to the high school would be a consideration.
Sure. Yeah.
And then that's the last comment, is during those high traffic times, when the school buses turn south down onto Water Street, that turn, the way that the road is built, it causes the buses to swing out really wide into the traffic that's at the stop 17 instead of north.
So as they're turning this way,
Exactly.
swing wide, yeah.
So I think that intersection would need to be reevaluated, and even, turning out off of Water Street, some observation of that zone during peak school times, I think would be important too.
Yes.
Because if people take risky decisions, and we have new drivers sometimes involved in that, it's complicated.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Pressure. Please.
A question of the Water Street people while you're here. So originally, we had wanted to have the access to this site be where the access road is now for the bridge project, and we assumed that was probably a no-go. Was that a safe assumption?
We own a tiny bit of that right away, but it would be much more in the interest of David Marie, Morris, and Barbara Gonzalez, who own a much larger, it would be much more significant.
Where is that
So
access?
can you get a sense of if?
So if you turn right down the dog leg of Water Street and you, instead of running into the trestle, where the new access road, the temporary access
Oh,
road
okay,
is.
okay. I got it. I'm sure it is.
But I mean, what's your sense? Probably it wouldn't be welcome to have a permanent road going through that location, right? Is the idea that was going to be temporary, you prefer it to be temporary? I think
it would be a worthwhile conversation to have with neighbors.
Well, you guys are some neighbors. How do you feel about it?
Personally?
Yeah.
I think that the environmental concerns those don't go away. But I think that in thinking about the comprehensive town plan and having walking accessible public transit with a little room spread out so we can to be able to integrate a long-term public transit system, I can see the benefit for the town overall.
But in your opinion, is bringing the access in, where the current access road is now for the bridge project, preferable to this tight access that we're seeing here?
I just don't think that's possible.
I don't think it's a really, I drive a Honda Civic and I don't like turning into my driveway all the time.
So I guess it's more preferable. Then.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I, of course, wouldn't speak for, I don't speak for anything.
I only want you to speak for yourself and, your friend in the back if she's interested. But it sounds sounds like you're a little further away from the access road.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you raised a good question to start off. Is there anyone who feels that, or maybe leaning towards 3 and 4 as a preference? We had 10% of the voters had voted for one of those two. Does anyone want to defend those, or is it clear?
In defense of option 4, can you go to that? Aside from the cost, which is not negligible, there is a bus turnaround. You've actually shown 3 buses there. I doubt if that's ever going to happen. There appears to be room for expansion of parking. There appears to be sufficient room for a structure if you start up into the future and if the project is wildly successful, so that you have a place to get out of the cold in the winter as you do the run. And I think that long-term parking is an important factor and needs to be close to access to the train.
So a comment on number 4, this option is a 30-minute walk from downtown, and which makes it in inclement weather pretty much a no-go for most people. And so this option pretty much is supposing that all access will be vehicular and forces that, versus the other options downtown actually allow multimodal access to a much broader part of the population. Similarly, if this diesel-powered rail car, commuter rail thing ends up happening at any point, that would mean that commuter train access would be required to drive out here to catch the train, or complex bus interchanges, like take the Tri-Town bus downtown, change buses to the hospital loop to get out here, which would make it vastly more difficult. For people who really need long-term parking, the Virgin station is right next to a parking lot with hundreds of spots, or maybe not hundreds, it appears to be hundreds of spots.
Feels that way.
And so, for anyone in an outlying area that really needs to drive and park, Virgin is not that far away, and there's ample parking for long-term there.
Somebody asked about possibilities for a station and the so-called hybrid site. It's right next to the old station, so if sometime in the future, a part of that building came up for rent, it would be there. I'm Chris Roberts, by the way, from Middlebury.
Putting up a strong defense for the hybrid site. That's good. Yes, sir.
Victoria DeWitt. I was wondering, while it's slightly more expensive to build number 2, its maintenance costs are lower than number 1. So I'm wondering why, and they seem in ways pretty similar, so I'm wondering why maintenance on number 1 is higher than number 2.
Look this way, I think there's no plow, the plowing is a little bit less for the road, the parking spaces. There's only 6 new parking spaces constructed, say 2.
And there was additional sidewalks though to connect to the underpass at site 1, and if they were to be extended into Marble Works, that would be more sidewalk that would need to be cleared in the winter.
I think
Almost twice as much, just anyway.
Yeah. Sure.
Frank McCartney. The old railroad station was just mentioned, and back in June, when this, before the first meeting and around that time, there were lots of comments on the Front Porch Forum, at least, about the desirability of simply using the old station, trying to be part of it. Now, I realize that that is privately owned. I realize that parking is also a real challenge there with the existing parking lot, because that's County Tire, I think it's County Tire Road. That property, at least all of you depend on that heavily for parking. But with the sites that you've chosen, or some hybrid of number 1 and 2, you're dealing with parking that would not impact that lot at all. Has anyone seriously inquired about trying to acquire that building or the rights to that building?
Yes, we've had several conversations with that property owner, and I can safely say it's a no-go at this time. Yeah.
You can't make him an offer, you can't refuse it.
Well, I suppose if I had infinite coffers, I suppose there's always a price for everyone, right? But,
Exactly.
yeah.
I'm in favor of site 1 or 2 or the hybrid. And I think that saving money on, if I can comment on, it's saving some money driving into access, public access is critical. I think this is an area that a lot of work has been done to try to provide access and protect that access from in the downtown. So I would say if there could be savings by doing a hybrid, drive that into the pedestrian amenities to get there. Like safety, like parking, like access, or other things that help pedestrians be safe.
I guess another point for the hybrid site, if the hybrid site is essentially just the platform there, it would be at no cost to the town. I mean, that piece of features clearly said that they will cover, and then, then it's really the parking and access to that site that
right, so
still need to be addressed.
The town could bond for those kinds of improvements that are needed, but to utilize existing parking and to have after, be there at the train stop when the train comes in. And so that actually provide the opportunity for people not to have to park or park long term.
Yeah.
So David, we have about 15 minutes left. I'd really love to get people's input on how the evaluation criteria shook out in terms of what was important to them. Just really quickie, like, does this look right to the crowd here today? And then also leave you some time to go over next steps.
I guess, so these are the criteria here, and we also had this table here. I mean, it's been interesting just, and I think something that we talked through and maybe struggled with some bit, we all have our own kind of subjective, some people feel safety is the most important thing. Some people feel that, proximity to the downtown or transit accessibility, and they all can't be important, or they are all equally important. And so, where we landed with the survey was to not, we were initially going to ask, rank it based on all of these criteria, and then we get this very, very precise but maybe not accurate result that would say 2.7 was the score for site 1. So, I think just the conversation here, I think we get at some of the complexities here, that different values for different folks. But I think generally it sounded like the majority sentiment was proximity to downtown, accessibility, and safety. I think resonate with those scores that we saw before, that those are all important sites, and I think that's why we saw the 1, 2, and hybrid score higher.
I think we've heard a lot about cost tonight that wasn't reflected in the survey. Just checking that, would you agree that cost is important?
Yes, ma'am.
Heather Seeley, I was going to say what Jennifer just said, and that one of my biggest disappointments, especially as a town official, is that cost is not a higher consideration in this. So, for me personally, and my perspective, cost is a big, it's big. So.
And I guess, it doesn't have one of these red circles around it, but it is certainly, very, almost 50% said it's important. Another 45% said it's very important. So that's 90% of people said that there's some level of importance. It just didn't, the one bar wasn't higher than the other, so we didn't certainly. But I think, generally was thought to be important.
One of the things I'd just like to speak to in our conversations is that we've had great frustration getting better financial information out of the train folks and really understanding what they will and will not be paying for, it has been nearly impossible. And so it has been very, very difficult for us to have a candid discussion about the difference between the overall cost of a site and the town's part of that share, because they are not forthcoming with which parts of the project they will and will not pay for. And so, you know, we have spoken at length about that in every meeting we've had and have tried to navigate a path through that with basically without being able to know that piece of information. So just, I wanted to make it clear that it has been of the utmost importance in our conversations, but because we can't figure out what they will and won't pay for, we decided that it was also really important for the town to have a discussion about what was best for the town, knowing that we still have to figure out how to pay for it. And it makes me excited that the town has kind of generally spoken in favor for the less expensive options, in that there isn't as much infrastructure or property acquiring necessary. And so that to me is reflected in the way that people have answered the surveys, even if it didn't come out as, you know, the very important box got ticked. So it's just a kind of brief response to that.
I would also add that we've been pushing hard on E-Trans, and that's still a little elusive as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I completely understand that and would not plan on the state paying for any more than they've already indicated there. You know, because, I mean, we're dealing with that a little bit in other infrastructure related to the rail project, so.
This one is a little different than a typical V-Trans project where there is a $12 million earmark for the western corridor, rail corridor. That,
So what's the problem?
I mean, there's lots of other demands on that, but it's, you know, it's not like they have.
We're not even talking about $12 million.
But, you know, a typical project, they'll budget $1.5 million for this intersection, or, you know, $5 million for this roadway. This is a little bit more, I mean, it just adds to the frustration that's mentioned.
Has Middlebury College taken any position on any of these sites, any official position? Does anyone know?
I'm trying to think how to answer that question. I mean, I met with them. I got their opinion on whether they would host the fourth site, and they were happy about that. And they see that there's some opportunities maybe for them to partner with us in different ways to develop that site. Is that what you mean?
They haven't come out with, this is our first, second, third, and fourth choice, like they took the same.
I think they're being politely supportive, but letting us, like, you know, draw our own conclusion.
Question. Bruce Burgess, can you share with me and the group the demographics of the Amtrak customers boarding in Middlebury and going away, and the demographics of the Amtrak customers treating Middlebury as a destination?
Sadly, no. I mean, this is something that we've talked about so much as a
Well,
group.
then how do you know, how can you base, other than public opinion, the needs that you have for any one of these facilities?
I guess an educated speculation or an educated guess. We have some sense of who's going to use this. There are people who are maybe not looking for the fastest route to New York City or to the fastest route to Albany or point south, but, you know, maybe more leisure travelers, students.
Okay, so those are people who are originating here. Describe the people who might use this as Middlebury as a destination.
Parents going to see their kids at college, people going to see the foliage, to visit a quaint New England town. I mean, this is speculation, but I imagine it's probably pretty close. People who have family who live here and want a different way to visit them, who want to stay at the inns and tour the area.
Megan Brigg, I just want to follow up. It looks, I'm squinting, but is environmental resiliency the fourth highest in terms of the most important?
In terms of most important, it looks like it is, yeah.
I just wanted to underscore that, and, you know, within the town, all of these sites are within the floodplain, and so just sites 1 and 2 offer greatly lower impermeable surface creation than the water street or South Street. So that's great.
And just,
I don't believe all these sites are in the floodplain. I don't think it's an accurate statement.
oh, I think you said 3 and 4. 3 and 4 are definitely.
I heard all the sites.
All, you're right there, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
3 and 4.
I'm sure if anybody's taking notes. I think so.
So I wasn't able to take the survey because I didn't know about the meeting until earlier today. So I just have a question about it. Within the survey, when you were asking people how much they cared about capital costs, were the numbers there for the 4 different sites? Because if you're asking about costs in the abstract, it's very easy to say like, oh, it's important, sort of. But if you don't have like numbers in front of you, you don't realize that like there's quite a big difference in some of the sites. It's not, you know, 500,000 versus 510,000. You know,
Right, yeah.
so I just wondered, were those numbers in the survey or were they not?
Yes.
they were.
There
Okay,
were
all right,
estimates on each bid.
okay, thank you.
But I think your question earlier was, you know, $1 million is a lot to you and me, but is from a municipal budgeting standpoint, is that a lot of money? And I think, I don't know that everyone has a good feel for that.
Yeah.
So,
Just one point on the cost. I think that this has some foresight to it in the fact that we're talking about infrastructure and the future. That takes investment. So maybe cost isn't the most important thing. Although I understand budgeting and all of those issues, but we don't want to go the cheapest route that then cuts off any potential for growth or a building or anything down the road if, you know, rail should continue to grow. So I think that may be reflected there as well.
just before you raised a good point or something I forgot to mention, the survey is going to stay up for at least another week, maybe a week and a half, so go to the town website, you can see a link if anyone here wants to take the survey. If you want to take it once, it doesn't allow you to take it once, but if you haven't taken it, please do. Sir.
Adam Franco again. So this idea of the hybrid site is a really interesting one, and I think in terms of cost and a few other factors, it brings up some really interesting opportunities for the town, especially so on the cost, if it could be built with only utilizing on-street parking, there could be almost no upfront cost to the town, and whether it's a generation from now or sooner, either the existing old train station building could potentially become available should that change hands or other events happen in the future, or by shifting the platform slightly away from the National Bank of Middlebury, potentially that parcel could house a train station as well, if this becomes a utilized thing. So by sort of utilizing just that kind of empty curve of the road, it actually may allow the town to sort of build on this over generations and utilize different pieces as they become available in the future.
Yeah, I think if we maybe bringing up the plans for the tunnel projects, we can actually look at this area.
Well, actually, we can do that like with our steering committee. You know, I really want to stick to the sites that we have
Okay.
in the survey. This is a new thing brought up by our steering committee member tonight, so I think we need to develop that a little bit more. But I think it's really good to have that general input to use in that conversation.
And just looking at the clock and wanting to stay on folks' minds, and we'll all be here afterwards. We're going to talk, but trying to keep us to 8:30 and to finish on time. Maybe we'll just do one last go around, and then we'll end with party thoughts and next steps. Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned the survey is going to be open for those people who haven't already taken it. If you've already taken the survey, and now you've been to this and you think, oh, maybe I want to change my mind, or something, or this other, what is there going to be another survey or something that one could say, okay, round 2, once you presented it down to 2 or something like that, I don't know.
So we haven't thought that through yet. I mean, it's a good question. I think at a minimum, it would be helpful to have, email Jen.
Yeah, I can answer that question. So there won't be a second survey, but you could take the survey again I think. We're not really sure about that.
I think you can from a different device.
Just go to your
Yeah,
home.
there's paper copies in the lobby, that's right, I think it's right. So there's some paper copies in the lobby, you can email me, call me, share your input. We've compiled everyone's verbal, like, responses. And we have it in a big PDF, and we're gonna discuss that as a steering committee. So give me some comments, and then I'll just include it in the responses. Say, I changed my mind.
I'm Faith Terry, and I found that the comments I've been listening to this evening have been invaluable. I think there's so many perspectives that are necessary to come into your decision making. The gentleman, I think you were right behind me, he brings to mind a characteristic that has not been addressed, and that is character of the station itself. What's unique about Middlebury, as is unique about Virgins as well, is that it has unique aesthetic characteristics that attract the populace, both living here and coming into the community. And having the flexibility in the future, whether the historic building becomes available or a new one needs to be established, I would think it'd be real important to have that as attractive or an attraction unto itself for the community if part of the goal is to enhance the character so that people come to it for the reason alone. It doesn't have to be an expensive solution, it just has to be a thoughtful one. And aesthetics and architectural character should be integrated in the decision making. I thought the fact this gentleman happens to own that property across the street from Choice 1 is intriguing, because there is the flexibility to expand and build a building there if the historic old station never becomes available.
If you go to site 1, you're saying?
Mhm.
Yeah.
But the points that each of you made in terms of accessibility to the student body, accessibility to the multimodal transportation opportunities, certainly availability to those that are less able is essential. But aesthetics are important too. And this is all part of economic growth for the community.
Absolutely.
So I found it very enlightening.
Good.
What are our next steps, Dan?
All right, our next steps are, so we'll be obviously compiling all of this information, keeping the survey open. We'll update the survey results accordingly back to the steering committee. The steering committee will then converse and make a determination. Is there a clear winner to present to the select board in October, or is it there's two and a hybrid possibility? So the next kind of public viewing would be before the select board, where there's the question is posed, which site do you want to recommend to V-Trans? From there, we'll then take that recommendation and wrap it up in a report with all of the background, and then meet with V-Trans, the town will meet with V-Trans to then convey the results. And I think there's some real important subtleties and nuances regardless of which of these sites gets chosen. And so I think it's important to convey those details. It may just get lost in handing a report, passing a report on to Montpelier. So that would be the next step. And then as far as I understand, I think V-Trans has the monies lined up, so they would roll right into final design of the project, which would have its own public process to make sure once the actual details, where the train tracks go, where does the parking, where does maintenance and so forth happen. That would happen kind of on its heels, probably early next year at the earliest.
Frank McCarr again. There's been a lot of talk about some sort of a hybrid options 1 and 2 here. It would seem to me to make sense for you folks to somehow flesh that out as what that might look like, or options for that or whatever, in time for the public to be able to look at that, comment on that before the meeting coming down with this.
We'll take that under advisement.
Duly noted.
All right, well, we'll stick around if anyone has questions, but thank you for coming out.
Should I sleep in the
Thank you.